Countries whose real GDP is increasing substantially above the average are examples of countries with economies that are expanding at a rapid rate. When an economy is expanding at a rapid rate, more goods and services are produced within the nation, and the population as a whole enjoys greater prosperity. In this video, we will take a look at 5 of the economies throughout the world that are expanding at the quickest rates. The IMF explains real GDP. People are interested in knowing about an economy, whether or not the sum of all the products and services it produces is expanding or contracting. However, because GDP is measured using current prices, often known as nominal prices, it is impossible to compare 2 time periods without first adjusting for inflation. It is necessary to modify the GDP's nominal value, taking into account changes in price, to calculate its real value. This will enable us to assess whether the value of output has increased because more is being produced or simply because prices have increased. When converting from nominal to constant prices, a statistical technique known as the price deflator is employed to adjust. The gross domestic product, GDP, is an essential indicator since it provides data on the size of the economy as well as the performance of the economy. Number 5. The average economic growth rate in Libya throughout the years 2022-2026 is 6.9%. The oil-based economy of oil-dependent Libya ought to grow at a quick clip over the next few years as a result of forecasted increases in energy production as well as sustained high prices for crude. On the other hand, this is probably going to be dependent on whether or not the political climate gets better. As a result of the failure to hold the promised general elections in December of last year, the country is currently divided between 2 competing governments, one based in Tripoli and the other in Sirte. Clashes between supporters of the 2 governments disrupted oil production earlier this year. Quick elections present an opportunity for profit since they have the potential to bring the country back together under the control of a single government, which would increase both oil production and investment. On the other hand, there is a potential for more violent conflict and economic disruption if the current standoff between competing governments is allowed to drag on for an extended period. This presents a downside risk. The oil sector, which has strong multiplier effects across the economy, will be the primary driver of economic growth in the next years. Because of this, government spending and investment will remain robust, which will in turn promote a recovery in private consumer spending. The non-oil sector will continue to have slow growth in the first half of the forecast period as a result of periodic conflict and the inadequate provision of services, especially inadequate access to power. On the other hand, if the conflict stops and an elected administration that is more unified and effective is installed by the middle of 2024, we anticipate a gradual improvement in security, and the government will work toward promoting growth in sectors other than oil. Number 4. Niger average growth 2022-2026, 7.6%. The increasing production and exports of oil in Niger will be beneficial to the country's economy in the years to come. In particular, the almost 2,000-kilometer oil pipeline that would connect the port of Seme in Benin to the rest of the world is anticipated to become operational in 2019. Support will also be provided by the construction work being done on the Kandaji Dam as well as its eventual completion. Despite this, at the end of the time horizon covered by our forecast, the country will still be among the poorest in the world. In addition, taking into account the fact that the population is increasing at a rate of over 3% annually, the rise in GDP per capita will be noticeably less remarkable than the overall growth in GDP. Climate change, attacks by terrorist groups, political instability, increased pricing for agricultural supplies, and social unrest are just some of the many potential dangers that could arise. To foster a development trajectory that is more robust and inclusive, comprehensive institutional and economic reforms are required. These reforms should boost overall productivity, particularly in agriculture. Reforms should be implemented to strengthen economic governance, including taking measures to ensure that the rents from the petroleum sector are invested to support equitable growth. Number 3. Fiji average economic growth 2022-2026, 7.7%. As is the case with Macau, Fiji's economy is highly dependent on tourism revenue, notably that which originates in Australia and New Zealand. As a consequence of this, the economy experienced a GDP loss of over 15% in the year 2020 during the height of the pandemic as a direct result of both Australia and New Zealand implementing stringent quarantine requirements. The following year, 2021, saw Fiji's economy suffer another, but less severe decline. As a result of this severe recession, we now have a more advantageous base of comparison, which will have the effect of moderating growth throughout our projected period. In the first half of the year 2022, the number of tourists arriving was more than half of what it was before the epidemic. Risk considerations include the country's limited economic foundation, its susceptibility to the effects of natural disasters, its high level of public debt, and its significant current account deficit. Visitor arrivals in July 2022 were almost 82% of those before the COVID-19 pandemic. The number of tourists from Australia was 101% of the July 2019 total, while the number of visitors from Canada was 76%, New Zealand was 90%, and the United States was at 94%. If additional severe strains of COVID-19 do not emerge during the year, the significant tourism comeback will continue unabated. Number 2. Macau average economic growth 2022-2026, 11.9%. Throughout our prediction horizon, it is anticipated that Macau, which is a special administrative territory of China, will expand at the second fastest rate anywhere in the globe. However, this will mostly reflect a base effect following one of the world's harshest pandemic-related downturns, rather than excellent underlying growth prospects. This is because the base effect follows one of the steepest pandemic-related downturns. Macau's economy has been severely damaged as a result of China's zero-tolerance attitude against COVID-19 and border restrictions. Macau's economy is heavily dependent on tourism and gambling. The significant growth estimates for the next years are contingent on China eventually relaxing its stance over COVID-19 and, subsequently, a rebound in the number of foreign tourists who visit the country. The nation's dependence on a single industry, gambling, and visitor arrivals from the mainland are also potential sources of instability. Number 1. The average rate of growth in Guyana from 2022 to 2026 is 25.8%. In the coming years, Guyana's economy will be far and away the one with the highest rate of expansion. A windfall in oil profits is the reason for the optimistic projections. The production of oil increased from almost nothing in 2019 to more than 100,000 barrels per day, BPD, in 2021, and the World Bank anticipates that production will increase to more than 400,000 BPD by the year 2024 as additional projects come online. There have been dozens of oil finds over the past few years, with the most recent one coming as recently as October 2022. The subsequent surge in monetary receipts ought to encourage increased levels of government spending. Today's video ends at this point. Do you like it? Feel free to give your feedback in our comment section below, and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more videos.